Hi everyone, it's Laura here for Studio Katia, and in today's video I'm going to share with you how to create an acetate window card using birthday themed stamps by Studio Katia. As a first step, I started doing all my stamping and heat embossing. I have my sentiment placed on a panel of Bristol Smooth cardstock that I die cut with the Darling Ribbon and Dotted Frames dies. The dies cut an A2 sized rectangle with a dotted detail all around. And I went ahead and stamped my sentiment. This is from the It's Your Birthday stamp set using VersaFine Onyx black ink because I want to do some heat embossing with clear embossing powder, and this ink takes a little bit to dry, so it's perfect for heat embossing. The reason why I have it upside down in my Misty will be clear in a moment. It's basically because I needed to make sure that I had the proper alignment with the window part of my card. But coming back to this step, what I did was I coated the sentiment with some clear embossing powder by Wow, and then I melted it with my heat tool. I'm making sure that everything is nice and shiny and the look of the embossing powder is smooth, and then I'm going to stamp the sentiment again on a strip of cardstock. I cut this again with the Darling Ribbon and Dotted Frames dies, so on the right portion that you see here on screen and on the top and the bottom we still have that dotted detail. And here I have this sentiment which is partially stamped. And because I lined up this panel and the previous panel to the edge of my Misty, I am sure that when I put them one on top of the other, the sentiment will overlap perfectly and it will look seamless in the final card. Another element that I wanted to add to this panel, which will be part of the door of my window, are these birthday balloons. This is the Birthday Balloons vertical stamp set. There is a horizontal version too in the Studio Katia store, and this time I stamped them with VersaMark ink, so this is a clear sticky ink, and I'm going to coat them again with clear embossing powder. This is by Wow, I think I mentioned already. You see some of the powder stuck to the sentiment that I had previously embossed, so I went in with a paintbrush and removed any excess embossing powder that I had where it wasn't supposed to go. So even if you use your anti-static tool, you might still get some stray particles hanging around your panel, and a little paintbrush is a useful tool to remove those. Once everything was clean and I only had the embossing powder over my balloons, I went ahead and I melted that. And then off camera, I also stamped and heat embossed images from the Kobi Makes a Wish stamp set. This is really cute and great for birthday cards. Again, I used VersaFine Onyx black ink and clear embossing powder. At this point, all the stamping is done for this card and I could go ahead and start coloring the images. I decided to use Zig Clean Color Real brush markers and to use kind of a pastel rainbow palette. So I picked out a few markers from my stash and I started coloring in my balloons. And I did that by first laying down the markers in the shadow areas, which is basically the left side of each balloon. And then with my Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen, I'm going to blend them out towards the highlights. And I am leaving also a little white space, which is the light reflection on the balloons. And this will make them look shiny and even more dimensional. The reason why I decided to use the Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen is that it will also add some beautiful shimmer to these balloons. It's quite subtle, but the moment your card catches the lights, you really can see all the beautiful sparkle, and I think it's really a great effect. I'm adding the colors following more or less rainbow order, so I started from orange and I'm going to end up with this pretty lilac here. And then I'm going to start over again basically, adding first this red carmine color to start from the orange after this again. As I mentioned already, this cardstock here is Bristol Smooth cardstock, and this is really great to use with your Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers because it makes blending pretty easy. Sometimes I still won't get the blend that I want, and then what I'm going to do, as you saw a second ago, is I'm going to scribble the marker on my work surface. This is a glass mat, but any sleek surface will work. And then I'm going to pick it up with my clear overlay pen, and I'm going to add it then to the balloons, trying to get a smoother blend. I used 7 different markers to create my rainbow pattern, and once I was done using them once, I started basically my rainbow again, and I colored my way up to the very top of this image. It didn't take very long at all because these Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers are quite a quick medium for coloring, and this is why I chose them today, because there was a fair bit of coloring in this card. The great thing about them, like any other water-based coloring medium, is that you don't need a lot of markers to create shading on your images. As you can see, I have 1 marker per balloon, but still I'm able with my Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen and later with my Waterbrush to create a nice gradient and have basically several tones of the same colors on my image. I then moved on and colored in Kobi as well as the rest of the smaller images. I decided to use a light gray marker to color Kobi, and this time instead of using the Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen, I used a water brush. For his muzzle and his nose, I used some light browns, and I kept adding layers until I got the results that I wanted. For the cake and the presents, I brought back in those pastel rainbow shades so that the image would tie in nicely with the balloons that I just colored. I tried to mix and match the different markers on the different images that I have here so that each color would be represented more or less equally to the others and I wouldn't have a dominant one on my finished result. And then once I was done coloring all the images, I used the coordinating dies to die cut them all out. I also used the Trimmings Borders dies to die cut the panel with the balloons. This has a shape that matches nicely the shape of the balloon stamp set. And here you can see the die cut images that I'm going to keep in a little cup or bowl, I should say, so that I don't lose them on my desk and everything is nice and tidy. Off camera, I also went ahead and die cut some clear acetate using the Darling Ribbon and Dotted Frames dies, so also the acetate will have that nice dotted detail all around. And then here I have a little piece of cardstock. This is roughly 1.5 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall, and I'm going to score it at the midpoint, so at 3/4 inches, and then I'm going to fold it in half. And this will be the opening and closing mechanism of our window card. I am scoring it very well so that I'm sure that everything closes nicely, and then I can go ahead and glue it to my card front element. I'm using a tape runner by Crafter's Companion, and I am gluing one of the sides of our opening mechanism to the inside portion of the balloon border. I then opened up our door mechanism and I added some tape to the right portion. I used that portion to glue down my card base, making sure it was nicely aligned with the score line. And you can see when we fold over the panel with the balloons, the 2 sentiments overlap and it all looks seamless. As a last step, I went ahead and glued the acetate rectangle to the back of the balloon border so that together they form our card front. And because the initial plan for this card was a little bit different, I decided only at that point to stamp the balloons on this inside panel. It would be best if you did this step before putting together your card. But in my case, what I did is I folded the card front basically on the back of this panel and I went ahead and did some stamping of these balloons with some very light gray ink. This way, if I want to write a personalized message inside the card, I can still do it in that area and the balloons will not be too distracting. And then everything that was left to do was to adhere our images to the card front. I'm using some double-sided tape to glue everything, as I find this a little bit cleaner than liquid glue. But for the smaller images, I actually used my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive because it was a little bit easier to handle with those smaller die cuts. I am going to adhere a bunch of presents around Kobi to give a little bit more interest to that area. And then I decided to use the leftover images on the inside of the card, and I made sure to glue them so that they wouldn't be visible from the outside, so that this card has an extra surprise effect. To make the back a little bit cleaner, I decided to adhere some white cardstock cut at 4¼ by 5½ inches, again with the Darling ribbon and dotted frames dies. And this is also basically another space for a personalized message in case I have a lot to say to the recipient. And here is the final result. I think it's really a cute card with this nice surprise effect, and the fact that we used acetate on the front makes it a little bit different from the usual. As you can see, the opening mechanism is visible behind the acetate on the inside of the card. I don't mind honestly, but if this bothered you, you could fix it by die cutting another border using again the Trimmings borders die and glue it on the inside of your card. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope I inspired you to create with these fun birthday themed products by Studio Katia. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.